Hi, it's Mark Perera here, and it's another live stream on LinkedIn and YouTube. This week, we're looking at how we incentivize the supply chain for decarbonisation. The reason I picked this topic is I had a few phone calls over the last month of companies looking at, I guess, the ways to motivate their suppliers to accelerate their decarbonisation journey. With one company, I think they had about 10,000 suppliers. Potentially going to take the route of saying that if you're not disclosing carbon within 12 months, then we're not going to be doing business with you, which I think was a little bit of a blunt instrument to try and tackle this challenge that we have in terms of reducing carbon with our scope 3 with our suppliers and upstream partners as well. So we're going to talk through some research around this, and I think a really nice 2x2 that hopefully you can take back to your business and discuss different techniques and strategies that you can put in place to affect the decarbonisation with the supply chain as well. So before I do that, a quick introduction to myself. I'm Mark Perera. I'm the CEO and founder of Visible. I spend my days helping companies on how they decarbonize their supply chain through supplier collaboration. So spend a lot of time talking about the governance, the data, the innovation and collaboration with suppliers, but also how you can incentivize suppliers on this journey as well, which is a really important part as industries and companies go through the journey together. I also just co-authored a book with Peter Smith on Procurement with Purpose, where we're looking at the environmental, social and economic impacts of how we spend money as organisations and how we can do that to have a positive impact on the world and the world for our children as well. And prior to doing Visible, or in parallel, I was also the founder of Procurement Leaders. So I set that up in 2003, and we scaled that organisation and I sold that a couple of years ago. So I spent a lot of time in this space. Before that, I was a biology student at university, and I guess the world of sustainability and procurement all comes together now in terms of the new focus of organisations as they take the ESG agenda forward. So today, I would like to see the chat coming through. So if you are on the chat and the technology is working, and maybe you can send a message and see if it's actually coming through on here. I can see Natalia is online again. I think Natalia joined Peter and myself for our book launch last week. It doesn't look like the restream is working on here, but I can see the messages coming through. So maybe I'll manually add these in on here as well. But as we go through the session today, it'd be great to get your questions and your comments and maybe some of the case studies coming through. Oh, here comes the messages now, so that's great. Please do let us know where you're dialing in from and any questions you have. We can see Dina, nice to see you again. I think you joined us for the launch. Sarah as well, and George. Let's see how we get on today, but the messages keep coming through, so please ask the questions and share the video with people if you find this of value. This is all new space in terms of doing the live feeds, and next year I'll look to get a regular cadence on doing these as well. So please support me on this. It's all new, and I'm producing all this as I go along. So let's get on with the topic area itself. So what I'm going to talk you through today is a really interesting white paper from the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. Also, it was done in conjunction with PwC. So I'm happy to share other people's great thinking and try and amplify that. So I think it's really important that we share the knowledge around the decarbonisation journey, but also with other topics around the ESG, because it's all time critical, and the more we can share for our own best practice and share it with others so they can actually implement it, the better. So please do look at this report. I'm not going to read it line by line because I know you can read that yourself, but what I'm going to do is take some of the framework and also look at some of the case studies that I've seen reflecting the different pathways and levers that you can take into your own organization as well. So what do we see around this? Again, the research shows that 11.4 times the emissions are actually of your own company's operations come from your supply chain, which is a huge amount. And a lot of industries, there'll be 80% of the greenhouse gases coming from outside of your own organization, and as defined under Scope 3. So we need to see how we can really incentivize our suppliers and our supply chain partners to decarbonize. So this is an essential part. We can look at the governance of how we work with our suppliers. We can look at the data around who's disclosing their data, their performance, and we can do the collaboration and innovation with our suppliers, but we also need to incentivize them. This is a journey we're taking with them, and that's the focus of the conversation today. So how do we take that, how do we focus, incentivize, and unlock this net zero potential? In the last couple of weeks, or I guess in COP26 and a few weeks before that, we've seen the new net zero standard coming through. This means there's going to be a lot more focus around how you look at supply chain. So you're not just really reporting on your scope 1 and 2, but a lot more detail around how you're going to reduce your scope 3. And also there's the implications of both near-term and long-term journey to net zero. So there's going to be a lot more granular approach and reporting that comes out of it. So super important that we take this challenge on ourselves, and how do we put it into our organization as well. I will remind you, and if you're on my live session last week with the Decade of Our Lives series, I say this at least 4 or 5 times a day. Every 5 weeks represents 1% of the decade. So why I do these videos, why we like to do these live feeds and amplify, is we need to make a change in the next 5 weeks. What's something you can take away from this session today that we can put in practice in your own organization? Maybe it's reading the white paper or sharing the white paper, or taking one of the levers or the initiatives you can with your suppliers over that period of time, or putting the strategy in for January as well. So here it is. My life does revolve around 2x2 frameworks. I've never been a consultant, but I do find that this is the source of a lot of the truths that I now look at. So this is looking at the 2 axes here, with non-financial and financial running on the horizon, and then reward and penalty there on the vertical axis. So I think that conversation I had with one company when we're talking about enforcing performance, kind of potentially terminating contracts. I think that's the worst case scenario when we're coming to suppliers, and that's that bottom right one. But what I'd like to do is spend a little bit of time going through the build capability side, rewarding progress, and also leveraging procurement, where I think this is where we want to be spending our time as we take the journey forward with our suppliers. So if we look at the building capability side, this is where I guess there's 4 different levers in here. The first being around public recognition and co-branding. I think this is a really great opportunity to kind of lead by example. We've seen this with companies doing joint press releases with companies in their supplier base. Unilever shared some press release with Evonik, who they're developing some non-virgin plastic surfactants together. So they're leveraging new technologies to create those washing detergents of the future. So how can you use your brand to help the supplier in terms of recognizing them as well? I think also look at the supplier awards that you can do around sustainability. You can also report on this in your CDP reporting. So my favorite section of a CDP report on climate is section 12, which talks about the activities you're doing with your suppliers. And there's one around the recognition of those and putting it into their supplier awards. And a great example of this is Bosch, who honoured their suppliers. I think there was some 40 suppliers who were recognised by Bosch just in the last few weeks around what they've done around sustainability. So if you're not doing supplier awards, if you're not doing joint press releases, I think it's the time to start thinking about how you do that. This carrot and stick is an analogy that we need to look at it, and I think this is definitely the carrot that we should be looking at the behaviour and the incentives that we should do. And also look at the value this can be for a supplier. a press release with your organisation about new innovative ways, and decarbonisation is a great way and recognition for them to get, I guess, more revenues and growth out of their other customers or prospects they're working with. So there's real credibility of doing that, and putting your brand together with your top suppliers who are making the effort on that side as well. If we go back to the framework here, I think the other ones is around upskilling. So we're seeing that with the likes of EcoVadis are doing some really interesting stuff with upskilling. So teaching suppliers about what carbon is. We have to understand that a lot of companies are still on the journey of understanding carbon and how they would start disclosing on that. And EcoVadis are doing some great work on that side. Share learnings and resources. Again, this is a really interesting conversation we had with Amir from Novartis last week. They were talking about, or he was talking about, the Schneider Electric collaboration. So this is a joint collaboration with large pharma companies. I know Amir was helping to shape this up. But learning about how Novartis and those companies actually looked at their own operations around energy and how they reduced that within their business, and then sharing this with the suppliers. And Schneider Electric are taking kind of the lead on this one as well. So really interesting to see these industry collaborations, but also think about what you've learned as an organisation and how you can share that with your suppliers, or potentially share it more broadly across your industry, because in certain categories you'll be looking at a kind of industry approach, and the energy reduction for your suppliers will also be the energy reduction for your competitors and your peers in your industry as well. So if we go back to here, I think the other part is the peer benchmarking. So showing or presenting the data of where some of your large suppliers are against their peers. Again, this is something that we do at Visible through our technology, and I think it really helps drive it. So you kind of anomalize where the other suppliers are, but show where an individual supplier is against their peers. It really drives that competitive nature, and they also know where the future lies, and it will be more a sustainable way. But sometimes they need that little bit of a kick, or they need to go back to their leadership and say, our competitors are ahead of you, ahead of us as well. So I think it's worth taking a look at how you present the sustainability maturity of suppliers, and also how you show they're doing against their peers, and what improvement plans you can work on with them together. So I think it's an interesting approach to bring on there as well. I'm just going to check on these messages coming through, and here we go. I've got Natalia again on here. Which square do you see the biggest greenwashing threat? I'd probably say the building capability at the moment, because this can it's perceived as a more of a soft thing to do in terms of the press releases and the co-branding and sharing and upskilling. But ultimately, I think it's probably the most powerful part to do, because you're actually clearly showing what the rewards are and how you take the journey together. So I would lean into the top left and top right now, so you don't have to come into enforcing performance in the future. But there is the risk of greenwashing coming from that the top of the part where it's more about the reward than the penalty that's coming through. If we move to the reward progress side, I think this is really, really interesting. Now, I haven't seen any examples in the research in the report, hasn't shown any kind of pay for performance side yet, but I think that will come as a trend as we get closer to some of these milestones, and we find that maybe some of the other levers aren't coming into play. Beneficial payment terms, long-term investments, we're definitely seeing that coming through. The likes of Philips, I've got a program that both leverages both of those. So they're working with their suppliers to do some on-site factory audits around energy and efficiencies in there, and also looking at doing favourable payment terms for suppliers, which they think is going to have a particularly strong impact on the small to medium-sized suppliers. So again, paying them early, maybe on time, but let's not make it 90 days and make it 30 days on payments. Could really change some of those small to medium-sized suppliers who are looking at their cash flows, and also it gives them the ability to invest more in terms of the innovation and the decarbonisation journey as well. So I definitely look at that side, and we've seen that in a few other companies around the payment terms. But look at those long-term incentives as well, especially in the categories. And if you didn't see my video on the BCG framework, but those categories where you really have to transform, I think they're the ones that you're going to have to do the longer term investments with, and working with those suppliers to help transform them and potentially transform the categories in there as well. Which brings us on to leveraging procurement. So I think this is now we're getting into more of the financial, non-financial, but definitely getting into the penalty side as well in a bit more detail. What we've seen here, I've gone ahead a little bit higher, too fast on that one. I missed out on the higher product prices. And I think there's a question in there from Sarah. There we go. Do you believe companies will be prepared to pay more for sustainable goods and services? So I think the question is yes, they will, but that seems a little bit counterintuitive. I think they won't do it unless you start putting in kind of more demand levers in that. And I think Volvo is a really good example of that. Over COP26, they announced that they were going to have an internal carbon pricing mechanism, which when you start looking at the price of carbon against what you're buying, then obviously it allows you to go out and buy products and services which may be more expensive down to pure price, but when you put the carbon price on top, they're obviously a lesser amount, which will accelerate the journey of companies to go to a decarbonised approach. Now, you need to look at that from the right categories of spend. So if there's lots of, if you look at the scarcity of decarbonised solution, if there's plenty of solutions out there at decarbonised, there's no reason to go and potentially pay a higher price. But in those categories where there's low scarcity of decarbonised solutions, then if you're adding up the internal carbon price, then you might find that this is the time to actually pay more and actually help those suppliers in terms of scaling their operations. So over a period of time, that price will come down, but you're also tackling that supplier market in the right way. So I think decarbonised price, I think Cesare from Philip Morris also mentioned last week that they put an internal carbon price in place, and I believe AstraZeneca, Jim was mentioning that they've done that in the past as well. So I think this is the part where we can start looking at some of the demand management within the organisation and allow the leadership internally, when they see what the total price is on their budget or the products and services they have, plus the carbon offset in there as well. So again, it'd be interesting if anyone online has seen a similar approach within your organisation, but I think you'll find murmurings of companies now looking at the carbon pricing mechanism as a way to look at this and accelerate the discussion both internally but also with the suppliers as well. There we go, is a question on the carbon pricing. How do we set an internal carbon price when there's not a general consensus on carbon price? Victoria, good question. I think you have to do that from an organisational level. Standards will make life easier for everyone. Volvo have worked out how they're going to come up with a carbon price within their organisation. And I think that's where companies will have to take the lead on that. Unfortunately, there is no standard, as you kind of raised there, Victoria. So companies are going to the forefront and setting their own internal carbon price. So that needs to come from the leadership. But it would be a lot easier if there was a standard out there that everyone could adopt as well. And again, if anyone else has found a different approach on that, then it would be great to hear as well. On that, I'll pick up on Claudia as well. On the uniformity of reporting and disclosing carbon. Well, we find CDP reporting is the standard. I think it's been recognised by a lot of external bodies around that. So definitely the reporting, we see CDP climate data as the key. How do you do that at scale? Because obviously if you're doing it with 10, 20 suppliers, it's fine. But when you start putting out data across maybe 100 suppliers or 1,000 suppliers, it gets quite complicated. And the data sets are pretty complicated in terms of managing those. We actually have a new ESG module that comes out next year that kind of tackles that challenge, but also helps with the collaboration that's going on with the suppliers as well. But CDP data is definitely the part there. I think we should also looking at the data points of when companies are disclosing as well, and obviously the monitoring of performance over a period of time in that. I think also when companies look at the monitoring, it's not just the score of what a company's getting, A down to an F, I think is the scoring mechanism, but it's down into some of the details of the different sections in there. And I mentioned section 12, which is the around the collaboration with suppliers. So if we think 80% of our carbon or greenhouse emissions are coming from our scope 3, it'll probably be the similar part with their suppliers. So it's also understanding and get the insight around the collaborations that they're doing with the suppliers, because I think these are the kind of leading indicators of the maturity of the company and their ability to deliver on their scope 3 reductions as well. So I think CDP reporting and understanding the insights and analytics out of this is going to be really important, especially when you start doing it at scale. So you can find the suppliers that are reporting, but also are taking the journey, and you can see the evidence in terms of those as well. Now, there's no perfect reporting on this, and I think the standards are there, and we have to look at. I see everything as kind of a glass half full rather than half empty. So I think if people are disclosing and also showing the standards that they're doing around their reporting, that's a good sign. But we will have to get more into the minutiae. The other part and the complexity around the reporting, and when you look at CDP and trying to understand your scope 3 impact, is how does it affect the product and service that you're buying from that supplier. So if you are buying from 2 or 3 of the manufacturing plants of a supplier that has 50 manufacturing plants, you're probably going to need to know a little bit more detail around the energy consumption and efficiencies of those manufacturing plants that you're getting your product from, and the raw materials that are coming through as well. So overall company score is not going to get you there. I think the other complexity around reporting is probably not going to be just your first tier suppliers. You may have to go through multiple layers of suppliers in order to get to that net zero side. So that level of data is not there and reporting. So again, technology companies like ourselves and the other ones out there are going to try and have to help on that. But we're also going to see a network effect in industries, I think, as the first tier suppliers then motivate the second tiers and through. So I think we need to watch this and see how it comes through as well. So hopefully that answers some of the question, Claudio, on that side. Sorry, jumping ahead. If I go down to leveraging procurement, this is carbon reduction clauses, decarbonisation criteria in procurement, and mandatory carbon reporting. So what we are seeing in a number of companies is as those master service agreements come up, then it's going into those master service agreements. So that's the time to action now. So look at those big agreements coming with suppliers and seeing if you can get those carbon reduction clauses in there. It may be, we're working with another number of customers of making sure that they have science-based targets in with the aligned to your carbon reduction commitments in there as well within a certain period of time if they haven't done that. And then disclosing carbon by a certain time, and then potentially you'll get into the scoring side as well. But I think that's probably a little bit beyond in terms of what you'll put in the clauses there. But I'll definitely be looking at how you put this into your joint business plans with your suppliers, or at least the large ones. And obviously you'll be doing a heat map of which suppliers are having the biggest impact on your greenhouse gas emissions. We find companies looking at their top 100 to top 1,000 suppliers, and that quite often will make up 50 to 80% of their greenhouse gas emissions from their suppliers. So they're the ones that they're really focusing on as well. Decarbonising criteria and procurement, we're seeing companies now really kind of putting that into their frameworks. Vodafone, as the example that I had here, they're now putting 20% of the weight on the RFPs down to sustainability and also diversity, so environment and diversity of suppliers. So I think we're seeing this more of a norm. I think BT had a similar approach in the white paper as well. So definitely doing that. I think, again, you need to ensure that you have the data around your suppliers, around whether it's disclosed or standards of where they are, and make it easy for them to give that information to you. So again, whether that's taking an EcoVadis score or your own granularity coming through, it'll be good to see how companies are doing. But I definitely look at how you put the scoring in there, and those types of commitments abroad. I think it shows where your business is and the commitments of taking it forward as well. So I think we covered off the carbon reduction clauses, the decarbonisation criteria. I think that needs to come in the sourcing activities, those parts, but also when the contracts come up, that's also a time to look at the performance and make sure it's come into those joint business plans as well. And then the mandatory carbon reporting. I think the mandatory carbon reporting, which is getting down to that penalty side, and I guess if we then go over to the green, maybe I should have done that in the red in terms of enforcing performance. I think we really want to be looking at the top two boxes there around building capability and rewarding progress, and leveraging procurement to hopefully not need to terminate suppliers because of their contract and they're not taking the journey with you. So I would lean heavily to the top of the 2x2 here, and then maybe the governance and so forth will come through on the left-hand side in the leveraging procurement. We do in the bottom right, I guess this is the not so nice part, is the carbon pricing. So this may be the offset of what I mentioned with Volvo, which we're not seeing coming through now, but you start putting the carbon pricing onto the supplier. So you start looking at what the price of that would be in terms of potentially carbon offsetting and share the pain with the supplier. So it will force them down the journey. Financial penalties, I guess if you've already got those clauses into the contracts, and put the mandatory side, then there will be the penalties coming through. But I guess you want to do this at the last resort, and then contract termination is definitely not where you want to go. But again, look at the categories that you're working in. So those large transformational ones, the ones where there's high impact on your business and low carbonisation solutions, you're probably going to have to go out and find new suppliers or build new technology and capability in there as well. So they're the ones you really need to focus on in terms of the transformation of the categories. And this is R&D and procurement and everyone else working together and supply chain to try and deliver that transformation of important categories within your business. So you really don't want to be enforcing that soon. And some of those journeys within those categories may take several years for you to transform from a low carb to a high carb to low carb alternatives in there as well. So again, think about the surfactants within the home care division of Unilever. That's a big transformation there going on over there, and that's where the collaboration with the likes of Avonic, where they're finding new sources of carbons that can still keep the performance of the product there, but definitely hitting the low carbon approach on it as well. So we're coming up to the half an hour, so I don't want to talk too much more, but let's see. So every 5 weeks does represent 1% of the decade. I think it's hopefully this session, and hopefully you'll read the white paper maybe in the next few days and find some more detail on that as well. But do share your experiences and look at how you can actually kind of apply this framework within your business. But firstly, I wanted to share this because I think it gives a nice conversation piece with the leadership, whether you're in sustainability, supply chain or procurement, of how you can pull these different levers and the 4 different pathways as well. And how can you put that into your plans for next year as you go about on your own decarbonisation journey within your business, and you taking that to 2030 and 2040, hopefully no further than that on the net zero challenge on there. So please do read the white paper. As I mentioned, I'm doing these live feeds. I'll try and do them once a week next year, I think is my plan. I'll bring other people on, so it's a little bit less one-sided on here. Also, I'd like to bring on some more of the audience on here as well. So it'll be great to get you on here and do some panel sessions, and the technology allows me to bring people from the audience straight up, and I guess we're all working from our desks at home a little bit more, so you can turn on the video and the audio and hopefully join me on that as well. With that, I'll keep to a timely finish, and have a great day. Think about over Christmas and New Year as you're enjoying your festive season, about what you can do next year, and hopefully use the next 5 weeks to really make an impact. And I hope to take the journey on with you next year. Please do take a look at the Procurement with Purpose book as well. Maybe a great Christmas present for friends and family, or if you definitely want to nod off to sleep. But it's a good framework, and really enjoyed working with Peter on that, and all the revenues on that, and goes to charities as well. So I think it's a really good cause, but hopefully it's a value when you get to read it as well. With that, have a great day, have a great Christmas and New Year, and I'll see you in 2022. Cheers and bye.